Hi, my name is Timo. I'm 19 years old and I've been forging for over 11 years now, if I'm to believe my parents' old videos. Today, we are forging one of my signature werkgericht knives. The werkgericht knives are simple, functional and built to last. In this video, I'm making one from scratch with a few unexpected problems along the way.
You gotta be fucking kidding me.
Let's get started. It's kind of absurd when you think about it. I'm spending hours heating up metal until it's glowing, then beating it into shape like it owes me money. All to make something that already exists in every kitchen. You could buy a knife with 2 clicks on Amazon. Instead, I'm spending hours sweating over a forge, grinding, polishing, and questioning my life choices. But here's the thing, making something isn't just about the end result, it's about the process. The problem solving, the little victories, the stubborn need to shape raw materials into something better. It's frustrating, satisfying, and sometimes completely infuriating. And yet, I keep coming back to it. First, I'm drawing out the tang, the part that'll go into the handle. That has to be forged by hand. But for everything else, I let the machine do the work. After the tang is done, I forge in a bit of the tip profile and then the distal taper, which is the gradual thinning of the blade from the handle to the tip. It makes the knife lighter and more balanced. It makes for easy slicing at the tip with a solid heel in case you need to cut something sturdy. Without it, you'll get a knife that feels like a crowbar. Good for prying open doors, but bad for slicing a tomato. Then come the bevels, and this is all about making my life easier later. Forging in the bevels now means I have to grind way less later. If I skip this step, I'd be stuck at the grinder for hours, turning half my steel into dust and questioning my life choices again. But by shaping the bevels here, I keep the blade thin while saving time, effort and material. It also lets me keep the forge kill, the dark, textured surface known as kuruchi or brute de forge. It protects the surface and gives it character, and let's be honest, it just looks cool. If I forged this thicker, then I'd have to grind past all of that, and I'd be just making a regular shiny knife, which is nice in certain cases, but not what I want here. My power hammer has been fitted with special radius dies. These allow me to forge and pull steel in a certain direction, rather than just squish it flat. These make forging out the tang and bevels way easier. Before I can harden the knife, I have to soften it first. Sounds backwards, but annealing makes the steel soft enough to be worked cold, which is great, because the more I can fix now, the less pain I'll have later. After scribing out the profile with the carbide scribe, I move to the shear. I use the shear to cut off the bulk of the material of the knife before finalizing the profile with a belt grinder. Now with our annealed blank, I start cold forging the blade. Basically, I'm using a hammer to make sure it's as straight and flat as possible. At this point, the edge is only about 1.5 to 2 millimeters thick, so any little warp, even one you can barely see, will turn grinding into a nightmare. I check against the flat surface with a ruler, looking for tiny dips or humps in the steel. Fixing those now means I don't have to chase warps at the grinder. Trying to grind something straight is about as fun as it sounds, and sometimes ends with a knife across the shop. Now comes the fun part, hardening. The blade goes into the kiln, gets brought up to temperature, and then straight into oil. This is where the steel transforms, going from soft and workable to hard. Hard enough to hold an edge, but also hard enough to break if you look at it the wrong way. Not shown is the tempering, which brings down the hardness a bit and gives the steel its toughness. And as always, it picked up a little warp in the process, because of course it did. That's where the carbide hammer comes in. It's harder than the steel, so by denting it, it actually stretches the surface, pulling the blade back into alignment. It's a weird trick, but it works. This can be dangerous though, as one bad hit will crack the blade. And that's the warp fixed. A little victory. Now it's time to fit up the handle. Sounds simple, right? Just drill a slot for the tang and move on. Except today, the universe had other plans. Normally, I drill 3 holes in a line to form the tang slot, but for some reason, maybe bad luck, maybe karma, I managed to snap 3 drill bits in a row. 3 in a row. This never happens. At this point, I was starting to think the gods just hate me.
Dude, you gotta be fucking kidding me. You gotta be fucking kidding me!
On the 3rd broken bit, I finally got smart and fished out the snap piece with a broach, saving the block. Another little victory. With the slot finally drilled, I grind the tang to size, adding shoulders on all sides. These help seat the handle cleanly and make fit-ups way easier. Now, instead of just forcing the tang in and hoping for the best, I heat it up and burn it into place, getting the tang to fit all the way in. Finally, I carve away a bit of wood where the shoulders meet the handle. This lets me hammer the block on, so the shoulders recess slightly into the wood, locking everything together with a clean, seamless fit. No gaps, no wobbles, just a solid handle. Now that the knife is fitted, it's time to clean it up. I start with the spine in choil, rounding and polishing them so they feel smooth in the hand. Stuff like this makes the knife way more comfortable. I work up to a 600 grit belt, then finish with a buffing wheel until it's mirror smooth. It's a small detail, but one that makes a huge difference. Next, I polish the forge guild to get that nasty finish. The Scotch-Brite wheel smooths out the rough texture and leaves a silvery, polished surface. It's a cool contrast, still textured but with a refined, almost weathered shine. It catches light differently than a high polished blade, giving it a unique look that's both rustic and clean at the same time. Now it's time to grind the bevels. This is where the knife really starts to feel like a knife. I start with the 60 grit belt, cutting in the main bevels. The goal here is simple. Remove material fast and set the foundation. The bevels come about halfway up the blade. Any higher and I'd be making a laser. Any lower and it'd be more of a wedge. Next, I refine everything with a 120 grit belt, smoothing out the grind and getting the geometry just right. At this point, the edge is already thin, but I take it a step further with the Scotch-Brite belt. This blends everything together, leaving a smooth, even finish. And then the final test, flexing the edge on my nail. If it bends with little force on my nail, I know it's thin enough. Thin enough to cut cleanly and effortlessly, and thin enough that I have to be very careful from here on out. With the blade finished, it's time to shape the handle. This is one of those steps that looks simple, but makes all the difference in how the knife feels in your hand. I start roughing in the main shape with a 60 grit belt, cutting 8 facets to form an octagonal wa shape. It's all about getting clean, even lines. Too much off the one side and suddenly I've got a weird parallelogram instead of a handle. I've run into a problem. There's a small hole in the wood, which is from when they checked the moisture content, except that went a little deeper than I expected. Not a huge deal, but definitely not something I want in the final handle. Luckily there's a nice trick for that. I take some fine sanding dust from the same wood and mix it with thin superglue to fill the hole. The dust blends right in, and once it's set and sanded down, it's practically invisible. A little trick that turns an oh no into no problem. Our third little victory. On these handles I add 2 facets on the front of the knife. These make pinch gripping the knife a lot more comfortable. To finish up, I move to a 600 grit belt. This is where the handle starts to feel really refined. The facets get crisp, the shape evens out, and it starts to feel smooth in the hand. It's still angular, but there's no harsh edges, just clean lines and a natural grip. And then for the final touch, I take it to the buffing wheel. This is where the wood really comes to life. The buffing wheel polishes the surface to a deep glossy shine, almost like the wood is glowing from the inside. It's not just about looks either. The smoother finish means the handle feels even better in the hand. To join the blade and handle, I use thick superglue. This is a bit unconventional, but I have my reasons. This thick superglue cures in a very similar way to epoxy and has the advantage of needing no mixing. It's also plenty strong. You don't need that much strength anyways. Traditional Japanese knives are often fixed with wax instead of glue. I sharpen the knife on a 1000 grit naniwa stone, and I finish up on the stropping wheel. This gives a nice and toothy edge. And as you can see, it's plenty sharp. And that's it. There were a few small setbacks along the way, but that's just part of the process. No build ever goes completely smooth, and figuring out things is half the fun. In the end, it's always worth it, because now, this isn't just a piece of steel. It's a tool, ready to be used for years to come. Hours of work for something you could buy in minutes, but maybe that's the whole point. Hope you enjoyed watching. See you next time.